The burial was meant to be quiet. A small, solemn farewell for a mother and child found lifeless inside their own home. But just as the caskets began their slow descent into the earth, a man standing at the far edge of the crowd rose to his feet. In the space of seconds, the peaceful stillness shattered. Gunshots cracked the air, sharp, deliberate, final. Screams broke loose. 3 more bodies fell to the wet grass, and no one could have said they saw it coming. By the time the police arrived, the gunman hadn't even tried to flee. He was still there, not hiding, not panicked. And this was no random eruption of rage. This was something forged in quiet calculation, sharpened by a grief that had curdled into purpose. When detectives traced the trail back, what they uncovered behind closed doors was darker than the blood still soaking the cemetery lawn. This was not a tale of grief. This was a story of betrayal, and of a man who realized he hadn't simply lost his family, they had been taken from him. And what he chose to do in that moment would leave anyone questioning where the true evil lay. Some tragedies are born from sudden storms. Others are grown slowly in shadows, watered by silence, until the day they bloom in violence. This is True Crime's Altar, where every sin is punished, every betrayal has a cost, and every soul must answer to the truth. Like, comment, and subscribe, because these are the stories the guilty prayed would stay buried. It began like any small-town farewell. Muffled voices, rows of folding chairs pressing into damp grass, 2 polished coffins catching the pale reflection of a clouded sky. One full-sized, one small, a mother and her daughter placed side by side. Victims of an unthinkable cruelty that had shaken the close-knit edges of Fairford's suburban calm. Relatives gathered in tight clusters, clutching tissues in each other's hands. A preacher stood near the open graves, his voice unsteady as he read words of comfort no one truly believed. A framed photo of the little girl rested between bouquets on a small table, her gap-toothed smile frozen in time among white lilies and soft drizzle. Conversation had long since run dry. The air felt heavy, suspicious, as though even the gray sky was uncertain whether this was an ending or the opening act of something far darker. A slow wind brushed through the cemetery trees. The preacher reached the final prayer, and as the caskets lowered, mourners bent to grasp handfuls of earth. Some whispered last goodbyes into the soil. It was nearly over until it wasn't. 3 sharp cracks ripped the air apart. Not thunder, not the backfire of a passing car. Gunfire. Measured, controlled, merciless. In the space of heartbeats, the quiet gave way to chaos. People screamed and dove for cover. A woman in black crumpled over the flowers, blood blooming on her back like a second dress. Another knelt beside her only to be struck herself, spun violently to the ground. A third tried to flee, but the shot caught her mid-stride, dropping her into the grass. Terror swept the graveyard. Chairs toppled. Mourners scrambled behind headstones. Children were pulled away by frantic arms. And then silence. The kind of silence that doesn't comfort, only condemns. When officers arrived minutes later, the burial ground looked less like a place of rest and more like a battlefield. 3 women lay dead within feet of the open graves, all of them from the same family. Witnesses could name the shooter. They had all seen him. He hadn't run. He had simply walked away from the graveside, calm as though he were waiting for something inevitable. They found him near the gates, his hands raised, the pistol still warm on the ground beside him. His eyes didn't follow the officers. They stayed fixed on the caskets, as if listening for the faint thud of earth covering wood. Long before the echo of those shots, there had been only a man trying to hold his family together. For nearly a decade, Darrell Rhodes had lived a life no one bothered to notice. Quiet, steady, predictable. He drove the same weathered truck to the same maintenance job each morning at a manufacturing plant on Fairford's industrial edge. Clock in, clock out, repeat. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the mortgage, filled the fridge, and gave his wife and daughter a life with more stability than comfort. That stability shattered in October 2011 when the factory cut a third of its staff. Daryl's name was on the list. No severance, just a final paycheck and a box for his tools. He told his wife he'd find something else within weeks. Weeks became months. Interviews fizzled. Bills mounted. The mortgage slipped into arrears. He picked up whatever work he could, construction gigs, delivery runs, day labor, but it never covered enough. The fridge grew sparse. The warmth in their home cooled into silence. His wife, Lachelle, began spending more nights at her sister's house, returning only in the morning. The distance widened until it felt permanent. He sold his watch, then his tools, borrowed money from a neighbor just to keep the lights on. But the worst wound wasn't poverty, it was being invisible in his own home. And here lies the cruelty of neglect. It doesn't stab, it erodes, until the person you love forgets they ever loved you at all. By winter, the cracks were beyond repair. She mentioned separation, saying she was tired of watching life collapse around her. He begged her to stay, clinging to the belief they could fix it. But there was someone else waiting in the shadows to welcome her departure. In January 2012, she filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. She took their 8-year-old daughter, Nyla, with her. No fight over custody. No drawn-out court battle. Just papers signed, a moving truck idling in the driveway, and silence. Daryl was left in an empty house with little more than bills and the echo of their absence. Neighbors said he looked thinner, quieter, but he still mowed the lawn, checked the mail, left the porch light on as though she might bring Nyla back for a visit. She never did. By March, 3 mortgage payments were overdue. Collection calls came daily. Friends stopped calling. The house grew so silent it seemed to press against him, hardening something deep inside, not in rage, but in resignation. And the most dangerous kind of man is the one whose hope has been ground to dust. Lachelle's departure hadn't happened in a single night. It had unraveled in quiet fragments. It began with phone calls from her mother, Cynthia Boyd, a woman who carried herself like someone born certain of her own judgment. Cynthia had never hidden her opinion that her daughter had married beneath her. She didn't say it outright, but it was in the way she glanced at Daryl's aging truck, the way she called his job that repair thing, the way her questions about Lachelle's happiness always landed with an edge. At first, Lachelle brushed it off, but over time, she listened. Her sisters, Patrice and Yolanda, were less subtle. Yolanda, fresh from a breakup, believed no woman should stay with a man who couldn't provide. Patrice, newly married into wealth, treated financial struggle like a personal choice. Their words weren't daggers, but they were steady drops of water carving into stone. Over Sunday brunches and late-night talks, they told her she deserved better. And some of the deadliest betrayals are disguised as concern, wearing the face of family while feeding the seed of abandonment. After Daryl lost his job, their voices grew sharper. Cynthia offered to help her start over without him. Patrice suggested counseling, though she already believed the answer was leaving. Yolanda joked about sending her away for a weekend just to remember how to smile. Soon, Lachelle's absences became routine. She spent more nights at Patrice's condo. She left Nyla with their mother for days. Calls from Daryl went unanswered. When they did speak, her voice was distant, like she had already stepped out of their life. And there, in the soft spaces between those choices, the bond they once shared rotted from neglect. In late fall, Yolanda introduced her to Malik Turner, a friend she claimed was good company. He was charming, neatly dressed, and knew how to make people feel heard. He owned a small contracting firm in another city, drove a newer car, and had a confidence that drew people in. Malik told her she deserved more. He didn't push. He just waited. By the time she said aloud, "I'm leaving him," her family didn't protest. They packed boxes. Yolanda covered her first month's rent at a temporary apartment. Within a week, she and Nyla moved into Malik's home on the far side of Fairford, a cleaner place, newer, quieter. Friends called it a fresh start, but no one asked about the man she was moving in with or why his past relationships had ended so abruptly. People rarely dig beneath the surface when the picture above it looks perfect. Malik Turner wore respectability like a perfectly tailored suit, and neighbors welcomed him as a step up from the man she'd left behind. He was steady, spoke well, and knew how to keep his lawn trimmed. For the first few months, everything seemed calm. Malik took on a fatherly role, helping Nyla with schoolwork, offering rides. Yolanda called him a blessing. But blessings don't hide their own rot for long. His last two relationships had ended suddenly, both women gone from the city within days of breaking up with him, both refusing to speak about why. 2 years before meeting Lachelle, police had been called to Malek's house 3 times, once for shouting neighbors overheard, another for a suspected domestic dispute, and finally when his wife fled barefoot in the night, clutching her ribs and refusing to return. She never pressed charges, just vanished. Before her, an ex-girlfriend had quietly left after 8 months. Her family later revealed she had started sleeping with a knife under her pillow. None of it was in the records Lachelle could easily find. Malik was careful with his story. He called his exes emotional, unstable, or said they exaggerated. He told his side with polished precision. Lachelle believed him because love, when it's desperate enough, will excuse shadows until they swallow the light. The first real argument came over a missed call. She laughed it off. He didn't. His voice chilled, clipped, as if a switch had flipped behind his eyes. Another time, she caught the bathroom door cracked after a shower. He claimed he was checking on her, though her towel had mysteriously vanished. The largest crack came when he accused her of going through his phone. She hadn't. He didn't believe her. Words rose to shouts, a fist slammed through the wall, and Lachelle found herself backed into a corner while Nilo watched from the hallway. The next morning, Malik apologized. Stress, he said. Flowers appeared. Pancakes followed. To outsiders, nothing seemed wrong. But anger that learns how to retreat is only hiding its teeth. And Nyla, just 8 years old, had already learned to be small in its presence. Her laughter faded. Her drawing shifted from rainbows to faceless figures in houses without windows. At school, she grew distant. She flinched when touched. Teachers noticed the change, her slipping grades, her absences. Some days she came late with swollen eyes. Other days she didn't come at all. When counselors asked, she stayed silent. Silence, after all, is the armor of children who know the truth will not save them. At home, she avoided certain rooms. She wouldn't sleep alone. Torn clothes appeared. Bruises bloomed in places no child should have them. Lachelle told herself it was just adjustment. Fear, denial, and pride can be the most dangerous lullabies. They soothe you to sleep while the danger inches closer. There were moments she tried to leave. Bags packed once, only for Malik to block the door. He never laid hands on her in front of Nyla. He didn't need to. His voice alone could make the air sharp enough to cut. Nyla tried to tell her teacher once, a half sentence that vanished mid-breath. She scribbled something faint in the corner of her homework that caught attention but was too unclear to read. A welfare report was filed, but no visit came. No one stepped through the door. And when those meant to protect threw away, evil learns it has all the time it needs. One night, the house erupted with screams. Neighbors later said they had never heard anything like it. Rage rattling through walls, voices colliding in violence. Lachelle had finally confronted Malik. She accused him. He denied it. He called the child words meant to shatter her spirit. And when her hand struck his face, the last fragile thread holding their life together tore apart. Words can wound, but when pride answers accusation with cruelty, it builds a gallows for the innocent. That afternoon had already been tense. Lachelle had noticed cash missing from her wallet. Nyla had whispered that Malik had been opening her door at night. Lachelle didn't shout, she asked, again and again. He dismissed her. Didn't said the girl was confused, that she was paranoid. The silence between them thickened. By evening, Nyla ate alone in her room, a paper plate balanced in her lap, door closed. Around 9:40 p.m., the shouting started again, louder, heavier than before. Furniture scraped. A crash rattled the floor, then nothing. What followed in that house is known only to the one who killed them. The next Monday morning, a call came to Fairford PD from an elementary school. A student had been absent for 2 days with no contact from home, no calls, no notes, no pickup from aftercare. The child was 8-year-old Nyla Rhodes. 2 officers were sent for a welfare check. The house sat still at the end of a cul-de-sac. The lawn was trimmed. The porch light burned against the daylight. A knock brought no answer. Another, still nothing. Through the front window, the living room looked undisturbed, but unease settled over the officers.
If you're enjoying this video, kindly do us a favor and subscribe to our channel. Share and like this video. It's free and won't cost anything, but it helps and encourages us to grow and do more. Thank you for your kindness, and back to the video.
The door was unlocked. Inside, the air was stale, heavy with the first sour edge of decay. They called out, hands resting on their holsters. Mail piled by the door. The television off. No sound but their own footsteps. Then they saw it, the living room rug soaked in a dark, wide stain. Beside it, a woman lay on her side, her skin drained of color, jaw clenched, blood dried to a rust-red crust. Her eyes stared glassy toward the wall, hands curled as though still warding off the blow. Signs of struggle littered the room, broken glass, an overturned lamp, streaks smeared across the wall. They called it in, confirmed homicide, possible second victim. Backup arrived. In the master bedroom, beneath a blanket pulled to her chin, lay Nyla. No movement, no breathing. The bed looked almost like a place of rest, until you saw the stillness in her face. 2 lives had been stolen in one night. No siren could rewind it. Neighbors told police they had heard fighting in the days before. One recalled a scream, but thought it came from a television. None had called for help. And every silence in the face of suffering is a nail driven deeper into the coffin of the helpless. Malik Turner's name went out in a bolo alert. While detectives pieced together the case, news of the murders spread. One man didn't need details. Daryl Rhodes hadn't spoken to Lachelle in months, hadn't seen his daughter since she left. When an old neighbor called to say police had swarmed her house, he didn't ask questions. He already knew. He didn't wait for official word. He didn't cry, not then. He called no one. Something inside him had already split wide open. For the police, it was another brutal case of domestic violence ending in blood. For the public, it was tragedy. For Lachelle's family, it was unbearable loss. But for Daryl, it was the final unfixable theft. And grief, when left with no voice, can grow teeth. The day before the funeral, the air over Fairford felt like it carried weight. No birdsong, no street chatter, only slow cars and closed blinds. Lachelle and Nyla's bodies were released after the post-mortem. Malik was still on the run, but police cleared the scene and allowed for burial. Cynthia Boyd handled the arrangements with brisk control. She ignored speculation, refused interviews, told relatives justice would come when Malik was found. Behind her certainty, tension pressed like a storm cloud. Patrice and Yolanda moved through the house sleepless, restless. Patrice blamed Lachelle's judgment. Yolanda blamed the police. Neither mentioned Daryl, though his absence hung between them. When asked if she wanted security at the funeral, Cynthia refused. "He's not going to show his face," she said when Daryl's name surfaced. "He lost the right to grieve when he walked out on her." But there's a cruelty in rewriting the truth to make it fit your anger. It doesn't just erase the person you condemn, it erases the pain you helped plant. Across town, Daryl sat in his car outside a gas station. He had already driven past the cemetery twice, far enough to go unnoticed, but close enough to see the tents, the folding chairs, the platform waiting for the caskets. No one was looking for him. No one expected him. He hadn't stood over their bodies at the morgue, hadn't gone to the funeral home, hadn't said goodbye. But he would be there because some funerals bury more than bodies. They unearth the truth that silence tried to hide. By mid-morning, the burial grounds at Greencrest Memorial were filling with quiet bodies in dark clothes. A cool wind threaded through rows of polished headstones as 2 caskets, one just slightly smaller, were wheeled to the open graves. White roses lay in heart-shaped wreaths beside them. The preacher stood at a small podium, fingers resting on worn pages, waiting for the cue to begin. Cynthia Boyd stood with her daughters, Patrice and Yolanda, a framed photo of Nyla in her school uniform held by a young cousin. Somewhere in the crowd, a child's laugh flickered briefly before dissolving into the hush. The service began. Daryl arrived without notice. No one saw the car. He didn't stand with family or take a seat among the white chairs. He lingered at the back, head low under a dark cap. To most, he was just another mourner. He stayed still through the prayers, through the hymns, through the scripture. Only when the caskets began to lower did he move, 3 slow steps forward. His hand slipped inside his jacket. The first shot struck Cynthia between the shoulders. She dropped into the grass without a word. The second tore into Yolanda as she turned, shock still frozen on her face. The third hit Patrice mid-run, dropping her before she reached the gate. Screams broke open. Chairs clattered. People ducked behind headstones, clutched their children, grabbed for phones. But by the time anyone shouted for the police, Daryl was already walking away, unhurried, his path the same one he'd taken in. And here is the truth no one wants to face. When vengeance takes the place of justice, it leaves no winners, only more graves to tend. The first officers arrived within minutes, surrounding the grounds. They found Daryl by the back entrance, hands raised, gun on the grass. He said nothing, didn't resist, didn't look at the victims, only at the spot where his daughter now lay beneath the earth. In his car, tucked under the seat, was a folded note with no name. It read, "They sent her there. They knew. I begged. No one listened." 3 months later, Malik Turner was caught in Arkansas during a traffic stop. He was charged with 2 counts of murder and multiple other felonies. Daryl's trial began soon after. The courtroom was full every day, some calling him a murderer, others whispering he was a father failed by everyone who could have saved his child. The prosecution showed the footage, played the 911 calls, argued he had acted with precision and no remorse. The defense painted him as a man broken by loss, ignored by the very people he had pleaded with. They read the note aloud. They showed messages and emails he had sent warning about Malik, messages no one answered. Daryl never testified, but his silence weighed heavier than any words. The verdict came quickly, guilty on all counts, life without parole. Outside, the arguments continued. Was he a villain or a victim of a system that looked away? But in the end, 6 lives were gone. 2 men were in prison. A family was scattered in grief and anger. And the saddest truth is this: every life lost could have been saved had love been stronger than pride and had silence given way to action. If you ever find yourself in danger, or if you suspect harm is near, choose life over revenge. Reach for help, go to the authorities, lean on those who will stand with you. Let justice be sought through the hands meant to protect, not through violence that leaves nothing but ruins. Thank you for watching this story on True Crimes Altar. I want to hear your thoughts. Was there any moment this tragedy could have been stopped? Share your opinion in the comments. Tell us where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another story like this.